relationship to me is less clear than that of Iran, and that is mainly because of my ignorance. So I'm unable to comment in detail on that particular relationship.
Okay, thank you anyway. Perhaps Edmilson, will you continue from there?
Yes, since our colleagues in Portugal moved into renewable energy and energy efficiency, we do have some few questions on those issues as well. So, before that, Felipe, that was one student, he didn't show up, so we will skip those questions from Felipe. Okay.
Okay.
So who wanna take that? Okay.
No, Rafael again. You described in your text how the Chinese government has been trying to improve the energy used by industries, transport, buildings, etc. How effective have the implemented measures been? For example, how do you compare those Chinese experiences with similar actions in UK or Europe? How costly are those measures in the short term? Can those costs represent additional difficulties for China to recover higher rates of economic growth?
This is Thiago again. Can China really replace coal by oil or gas without major and effective efforts in improving the energy use in the country? How large scale coal replacing in China might impact the international oil and gas market in the future?
And we have Tabata that is taking over Felipe questions on the hydropower.
The three gorges hydro can reduce energy intensity by 20%. Do you think China may actually follow the Brazilian experience from the 80s when the Itaipu hydropower plant was built? Did the high availability of cheap energy ended up by attracting primary and heavy industry to increase the country's energy intensity?
Please.
Okay, we'll take the first question by Raphael. The improvement in energy use. In the short term, the main effort of the government has been focused since 2005 at the energy-intensive industries, steel, cement, plate glass and chemicals. And so they've taken radical steps to close down the old and inefficient plants, and indeed old inefficient power generating plants. And 2 years ago I met somebody from the State Planning Commission and I said, how do you close an electricity power plant to stop it reopening? And they said, we blow it up. So it is literally flattened, so it cannot be reopened. So yes, in the immediate impact of these closures of old inefficient plant is that people lose their jobs and that local communities lose a flow of income. But the government has been quite brutal about that, as it was necessary to save energy and also pollution, because often these inefficient plants were also polluting. But at the same time they've been building new, cleaner, more efficient steel, cement and glass plants. I think the Chinese experience today is also we have actually exported our industries, our dirty and inefficient heavy industries, to China and the rest of the world. So in Britain we have very few old industries, heavy industries. We may make some steel in Britain, but we don't make much. Whereas, a huge proportion of the world's steel, cement and plate glass is made in China. So the challenges are quite different in their specific nature. But I think the obstacles are the same. You're trying to change the behavior of organizations and of people, and there are costs to this. But in detail, the strategies and the needs are quite different. Will these actions in China slow down economic growth? I think in the short term and at the margin, yes, because if you suddenly slow down or close a number of factories, then you will be growing more slowly. However, I think that is not necessarily a bad thing, because China's economic growth had soared to 12, 13 or 14% 2 years ago. So I think closing a few factories and bringing it down to a mere 10% is no bad thing, particularly as much of this GDP growth was not actually a public good, it was probably a public bad, given that it wasted energy, was very inefficient and caused a lot of pollution. Coming to the second set of questions by Tiago, looking at replacing coal by oil and gas, I think you have to look in more detail at China's energy strategy, and they are not seeking to replace coal with oil. Now, back in the 90s, to a certain extent they were, but very much now they are trying to get coal out of transport and out of factories and replace it with coal use in China is actually multifaceted. It includes hydro, nuclear, natural gas, renewables, coal bed methane. So a whole range of strategies to reduce reliance on coal, as well as energy efficiency itself. And yes, demand for gas will rise as a result of this, and so we've seen and we will continue to see that China will become a growing importer of natural gas, both by pipeline from Turkmenistan and eventually from Russia, and by LNG from Southeast Asia, Australia and from the Middle East. And this is set to grow, so yes, China's demand will put upward pressure on global gas prices for the foreseeable future. Coming to the third question about the Three Gorges Dam, I think again we have to recall that China's power sector has a capacity of more than 800 gigawatts. The Three Gorges Dam is a mere 18 gigawatts. So it is but a small fragment of the total capacity of China. So the project by itself, although significant, and although the Three Gorges Dam acts as a major interconnector between the different grids in China, by itself it is not going to radically change the fuel mix or the price of fuel. In the last few years, if we look at hydro in general, China has struggled to keep the proportion of hydroelectricity up to 20% of its total electricity. Why? Because most of the new construction in power plants in recent years has been coal-fired. Because in 2006 and 2007, each year they created 100 gigawatts of new capacity. 90